Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Neo Tokyo's official podcast, Interlinked. Huge shout out to our sponsor, Playa3ull Games. They are inspired by gamers and funded by their community. They have a epic game on the Epic Games Store, a third-person shooter called Nexus. Hop on in there and check that out. They're also currently selling nodes, so if you're interested, check that out at their website, playable.games. That is a 3 instead of a B on Playable. Now strap in for the rest of this episode of Interlinked. We are joined today with a different background to dive into some current crypto topics. I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Hogsheadcheese, otherwise known as Jared. We're just chilling IRL. How you doing today, brother?
What's happening? I'm excited to be here, man.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, before we're about to get the ball rolling, you mentioned that you just released a squirrel into the park. So I knew that we needed to get this hot hitting information to the people immediately. So we hit record.
It's important. So, lack of vegetables, as you know, has he works here in this office and he's planting tulips everywhere, all over for spring.
Love it.
And we have two squirrels that have been eating all of his tulips, and he was in a rage. So he bought cages and has been trapping them. And for all of you PETA lovers out there, we're not killing them. We are releasing them into a beautiful park less than a mile from here. So this morning, the final squirrel has been caught, and with all the parades going on, lack of vegetables was not here. So I had to drive the squirrel to the park and release it to be with his family. So it's a beautiful story. Now in Louisiana, and me personally, I have eaten squirrel, and lots of people do. I just don't think it was in season, and I didn't feel like killing it, stripping the skin off and barbecuing it. Although halfway there, I'm like, that sounds really tasty. So there you go. That's the whole story. It has been reunited. No harm has been done, other than probably a little traumatic experience being in a cage for about 2 hours. So there you go.
Dude, you could have created the next leg up in meme coin mania. This could have been the second coming of Peanut the Squirrel. Share it on the podcast. You ate the buffalo squirrel. Buff squirrel hits the ticker, sucks up all the liquidity out of the space.
Buffalo squirrel does sound delicious, by the way.
Yeah, Steve Ranella recipe. I got one of those like cooking wild game cookbooks, and one of the recipes in there was buffalo squirrel.
Hey, and for all you who want to know how to clean a squirrel, Steve Ranella also has a great, like, less than 5 minutes, snip, snip, rip, super easy. And I think it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's a fantastic video. I highly suggest it.
I imagine the Venn diagram of crypto people who are into eating squirrel is so unbelievably tiny. We've effectively just shut off 99.99% of the humans on this earth. The hunters
Probably
don't want to
so.
hear shit about crypto. The crypto people do not want to hear about a quick rip of a squirrel carcass. Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. That's been this week's Interlink.
Here to help.
Yeah, I love it. Oh man. I mean, talking about the market, we're recording this on Friday, February 21st. We got our first little bounce, somewhat convincing looking bounce.
It's been a while since we've had a convincing bounce. I feel like they've all been straight down.
Pretty much. I do wonder, it felt like, and thankfully we were down in New Orleans all hanging, so I wasn't really like living on X as much as I might have been. Like vibes seemed like they could not have gotten lower. Like it was max sort of like bearishness on the timeline, which really just shows how like the beta between like Bitcoin and crypto Twitter has become so low at this point in the cycle and in like sort of the evolution of crypto. Like, I mean, if you're in Bitcoin, you're comfy. I mean, it's just hanging like still north of 90K, damn near tapped 100 again. Like it's really just the memes, all the alts that have just gotten fucking eviscerated.
Man, we've had some crazy meme, and I know there's lots of coverage on crypto Twitter and lots of YouTube channels lately on the Libra coin and Portnoy's coin now. The meme space has been just chaotic, to say the least. I don't know if you saw the Argentina Libra coin that had come out, and essentially someone potentially from, I guess, CoffeeZilla had done some research on it, and a few other people, and Dave Portnoy was in there, interviewing all the people that were associated with it. But it looks like from all the different research that someone potentially connected to the Melania token came in and sniped a bunch, and then, I guess dumped on everybody when it went up after the Argentina president tweeted about the contract address, and then the tweet came down, and there was just lots of mayhem after that. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some sort of backlash on that. It's kind of an interesting situation. I'm sure everybody's kind of at least up on some of what happened. So
Yeah, and I'd be curious. I mean, Dave Portnoy is like really highlighted. He's almost just like publicly pumping and dumping. And pretty people, at least like in the greater cryptoverse, are sort of split on, is that illegal? Is that not illegal? I don't know how much you focus on like sort of like pump and dump law, but would be curious on like where is it like market manipulation? Where's the fact that like these aren't necessarily securities factor in? Like, would love to get a baseline on that.
yeah, I mean, I think they would have, out there. Let's say you, are creating a token, and you and your buddies are like, okay, I'm going to be the one that promotes it. You be the one that goes in and snipes, and then when it goes to a certain level, we're going to dump. And you could have a conspiracy. There could be wire fraud. If it was done, fraudulently. Essentially, you have to essentially go in and say, okay, the scheme is this is what we're going to do, and everyone kind of gets together and has the game plan, and you have criminal intent to defraud people. Now if you are just, and this is again why I sort of always am on the side of a fair launch. To me, that sort of resolves all of these issues if you come out with a fair launch. But I think the other thing is, if you have access to the liquidity, the pools, and you're dumping some in, and then people are saying, oh well, all right, it's got liquidity, now we're good, and then they start buying, and then you rip all the liquidity out of that and then dump on everybody's head, and that's a premeditated move. You could definitely be hit with wire fraud. You certainly have civil penalties if you've gone in and kind of created the scheme to create it. Now, what if you're just creating a meme coin and it happens to go up, and you're owning it, and then you sell it? I think the intent of, what's there, and really how that's done, and really the words that are used on the website, and all the posts by, all the, key opinion leaders that maybe you've paid, all that matters, right, at the end of the day. So it's really like a fact-based issue to show, was there intent? Did we try to, kind of pull the hood over and kind of hide what we're doing, and then all of a sudden slam on everybody? That to me is a lot different. If you come out with a fair launch, then the actual people that are involved in it have to go out and buy it on the open market. I think that's an entirely different scenario, and one that I think is just clean. It's better. It really takes it out of the securities issues, on top of the fact that it's clear that you're going in and buying it, and then you're selling it, and there's no like holding on to it, waiting for it, and then dumping it on people. And I mean, a lot of that's is a fine line between what would be, some wire fraud, or what could be actual fraud, or, what is just the meme coin world. And there's certainly going to be some regulation that comes down at some point, especially after Libra token. I think that's, kind of like the final straw, and dumped Solana down because of all the just the scams and just how it looks. It's just a wild space. So, yeah, I mean, make sure that, you consult a lawyer to say, hey, these are the things I'm doing. Is this good? Is this bad? And I think that's a sort of a useful tool to make sure you know what you're doing going in, and have a good game plan.
Yeah, and I definitely understand sort of that distinction between premeditated and like a conspiracy and something that sort of just happens and what's provable there. But curious, like in the case of like Dave Portnoy, where he's a third party and not, I guess Libra, it's gotten a little bit like dicey because I've heard he was refunded. So that like is a bit of a back and forth. That seems to be in a different area. But let's put that one aside, and just him purchasing a coin, sort of riding his own wake of like pumping this token and then dumping it. Is that, how gray of an area is that?
I think honestly, the way that he's doing it and, watching him, he's pretty open about, hey, here's where I'm buying it. I think a lot of times he'll, at least let people know what his, or plan to let people know what his wallets are so that they can follow it. And, from what I've seen from him, it looks like he's at least trying to be transparent. Now, I don't know the exact details about what's happening in the background. All of that is certainly going to matter. And I think Mr. Portnoy is probably knows what he's doing, and hopefully has consulted somebody and say, hey, I'm buying these things and then I'm selling them when they go back up. To me, that's fine as long as you're not coordinating and having a conspiracy with other people. And again, who knows what's going on in the background. And his particular case, I don't know all the details, but from what I've seen, and we don't know about how you're talking about his. I know he lost a lot of money on Libra, and then according to him, I watched a show where he admitted that I think $5 million was returned to him, and he lost somewhere north of six, is what I think happened. So I don't know any of the details about how he was paid back, and it's kind of interesting where if some people are paid back and some people aren't, how does the team make that distinction? And supposedly it was paid from somebody's personal wallet. Again, I don't know the details, but as a team, if you're paying some people back and not others, I think it's a good idea to have at least some baseline for how that's calculated, so that if anything ever comes up, you can say, well, here's how we decided to do it and here's why we decided to do it. I mean, I think that's kind of just a basic business principle.
Yeah, and circling back to regulation, I think like we've gotten things have gotten so degenerate. I use it as like the comparison, and I don't know if this historically lines up, but I feel like there was a time in like Vegas where like everyone was like, you know what, I'm cool with people smoking cigarettes here. We should not have people doing heroin at the table, like, and we should probably clean up these casinos where people are not going to want to come to visit. It feels like we hit that stage in like crypto where we're like, holy shit, that guy's snorting gator over there in meme coin land. And like, it's become such a hellscape of like rugs that people are almost like, wanting Gary Gensler to come back, or I think very open to regulation coming in. Now, I always have mixed feelings about that because I do fundamentally like sort of believe that people should be able to like do this extreme form of gambling. And like, I don't want heavy-handed like regulation coming in on the meme coins, but the blatant fraud, the blatant pump and dumps, the blatant like behind like closed room deals with like KOLs and stuff that aren't like disclosed, like that shit gets real like shady. And I think the whole space would benefit from that being cleaned up.
Yeah, and I mean, I have no idea if it's true, but it seems like the recent dump in Solana was just everyone was like fed up because that's where all the meme coins are being produced. And Libra, I think, was really like the tip of that, where now you have the Argentinian president tweeting something, pulling a tweet. The same team supposedly behind Melania coin is the one that advised him, and then lots of people losing money, Portnoy coming out and potentially like being a whistleblower and then getting paid back. It's like all of that seems too much. Why can't we just have, like you're saying, legitimate, reasonable, here are the bounds, follow within here and you're good, and you start doing some crazy things. Like I know there was videos of months ago of, people saying, look, I'm going to kill myself if this coin doesn't go live, and they're live streaming it. And it's like, look, I think we've gotten a little too far on some of these things. And it's, at this point, I think you're right. It's only going to pull from the legitimacy of the space rather than, just let's go out and have fun and, try to make $1 million in the next hour. I mean, let's have some, sort of reason brought back in. And I think it's time for that to happen.
Yeah, and I imagine this administration, which I mean seems pretty transparently to have not only themselves, but the companies they're associated with and their families, the Trump family being a big example with like Barron and Eric Trump being so positioned in the space. Like once that, and I feel like especially Barron and Eric are teed in enough that they're going to identify like, hey, this has gotten too far and is sort of jeopardizing, the BTC or really ETH bags, the top 10, sort of top 50 altcoin bags that it seems like the institutions are playing in, and come down on some like regulation. Now, how much room they have to maneuver with the way that Melania and Trump went down without getting themselves in trouble is going to be an interesting sort of balancing act.
Yeah, I mean that does make it a little more interesting when your president and first lady each have their own token, within a week of them actually getting, sworn in for this, or him getting sworn in for the second time. That's I thought that was extremely wild when that happened. And I missed it. I was like sleeping and then saw it and I'm like, "Oh, there's no way it's going to go higher." And then it did, and then again, no way it's going to go higher, and it did. And I was like, "Well, at some point it's going to crash." So, and that here we are. It's definitely I don't even know. It's like the whole thing blows your mind when you think about where we came from like 2 years ago and where we are now. I mean, it's moving so fast, and I think it's time to just like pull back the reins and say, what is crypto and what are we doing here? And let's all kind of come together and decide. But I don't think memes are ever going to stop unless somebody
No.
just puts the bomb on them. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're too much fun. And, it's sort of like your own little world you create. And maybe this one works. It's, just kind of like gambling, really. Even especially if you create it, buying it is definitely gambling. But even creating them, I think, is gambling.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so hard to wipe something out of the space. Like it might just get harder and harder to do, which adding just more friction to that meme coin space is like probably would be healthy for the space, but it's hard to imagine it ever being eliminated, especially with the legitimacy of these presidential and first lady meme coins in the space. Um, I think what we're going to see in the general crypto space is going to be very similar to the traditional finance space, where there's going to be government and sort of top echelon of society sort of like anointed companies and projects that get the regulatory nod, and then I still think like the regulation is going to be used as a hammer to like take out ones that are viewed as like unhealthy in the space or rampant fraud or like hurt the legitimacy. I mean, it really seems like obviously Bitcoin with the institutional adoption, but also Ethereum, which I'm positioning this way. Maybe I'm in like total hopium mode, but I definitely think ETH is going to have a savage catch-up trade.
Now a word from our sponsors.
What's up, crypto gamers? Shout out to our sponsor, Myria. Myria is revolutionizing Ethereum-based gaming with its powerful L2 scaling solution. Think zero gas fees, instant transactions, free NFT minting, and more. Myria offers a suite of tools that are tailor-built for game development, including game-specific SDKs, a spec'd-out marketplace, Web3 spiked leaderboards, new AI super tools, and more. All this fueled by a fleet of player-run nodes that are a breeze to operate and pump out daily rewards for supporting the ecosystem. Plus, check out Meta Rush, the Battle Royale obstacle runner by Myria Studios, dropping very, very soon.
Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
There is breaking news today too that we probably need to come out with according to Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, it looks like Coinbase and the SEC have come to an agreement where the litigation is going to be dismissed, zero fines and zero changes to Coinbase business. So it looks like Coinbase has won. There was a pending appeal where Coinbase agreed and the court agreed and the SEC agreed to have an appeal. And the SEC was about to file their response to the appeal. And it looks like that is not going to happen. And I'm just reading this now. It came out like a couple hours ago, and I'm just catching up while we're talking to see if anything pops. And this is kind of huge. So the SEC Coinbase case looks like it's over. And I wonder if that is going to be the same thing for Ripple. So I think we're seeing sort of a change in regulation now immediately within, a month of Gensler being out. Here we are.
Yeah, and I feel like Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, they're definitely going to be part of those sort of like anointed crew. Like they have such good connections in Washington at this point. I mean, we really saw something similar happen with the cannabis industry where it was an uphill battle through California, Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado. I said one of those twice. But at a certain point where it got to a third of the nation on the medical and the recreational side, like you just hit this tipping point where like everything started to like go over, and there's a very clear sort of like split between like what was accepted and what wasn't. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen with crypto, where there's going to be sort of the ones that fall within the regulatory framework that they set up. And I think they're going to set it up based on which regulatory framework is the most accommodating to their bags.
Yeah, that's a really a great analogy, and I think I remember, a few years ago when all they were waiting for all this, for marijuana to become legal in the federal realm, like completely, and then all the stocks were like about to pump, ready to go, and then oh, there's a little news, and then they would go up and then go back down. Wait, it's not time yet, and I think we're still sort of waiting for that final approval just to say, look, this is not a Schedule One drug, and I mean, it really isn't, and we kind of all know that at this point, right? I mean, you've got fentanyl and heroin, and you've got marijuana. I mean, it's like, which one could you take and die from? Probably not marijuana. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. So to me, it's like, let's just make this sensible. Same thing with crypto. Rein in some of the craziness, make it sensible, and then let's, make this a new industry. And I think that's what we need. And I think when that happens, it's going to be unbelievable for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited for it. And this administration's moving so fast that it feels like, we could get big news soon.
Yeah. Yeah. We're waiting for, within the first 6 months, we're supposed to have a congressional sort of outline of what the regulation is going to look like. And I think that's going to be really exciting. And I think more restrained and a little bit more common sense than Mika in the EU and their regulation. And I think it's going to, really sort of open up the United States, for being the hub of, well, here, where do you want to have your project created? Well, look, the US is doing all of these things. Perhaps we'll get tax breaks like it's already been talked about for, cryptos that are created and operated here in the US. And that's really interesting. And, it could spawn sort of a new realm of, with all the AI praise. I think that is going to be really big when they actually start doing things and operating. We've talked about that tons of times, rather than just a hype cycle. I'm ready for that to actually kick off. And in the US, that would be great.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's just a total shift where I used to feel like people were crazy to open a crypto company in the United States. And now it's like overnight sort of like flip to, okay, no, actually, there could be an enormous benefit to being inside of the United States. I mean, equipped with risks. Like I would, if I was setting up a company today, I would set it up as a US company, but I'd make sure that there was like a way out of that, because whether it's winding down the company and opening up something somewhere else, but there's a real chance that this ends up becoming so incredibly bullish, and on the back end of it there's a huge crash, and that we get a complete rotation swap where the next administration was in, see, they like went into this whole crypto thing, and now we're having to eat our dogs because we have a great depression and a dust bowl. And then like, sometimes you can get some like real bullishness, and the genie does in fact kind of go back into the bottle.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. I mean, you've seen it here where 2 years ago, crypto was the most deranged thing you could ever want to do in the United States, and then 2 years later, you've got a president and a first lady creating their own token. I mean, it's so vastly different that that's the sort of that pendulum swinging, and it's like, well, this 4 years, we need to get those laws in place, put them on the books so that the next administration has to live within that protocol rather than just wiping it and saying, you know what, crypto bad, it's out. So, that's really important. And, Trump and Congress has an important role if they want to foster that here to make it so that, look, the next administration could change it, they could alter it. You'll have case law that comes out. I mean, all that's normal, but leave it in place, set some boundaries, and let's keep growing it and seeing what it could become. Because you, of course, and I always think this is going to be such an amazing change to, our economy and how we operate everything, that I think it's really important to foster that here.
Yeah, plus if you're looking for, I mean, we're talking about tax cuts, we're talking about spending cuts. Like if you're looking to foster more productivity and more like GDP per person, like crypto gives enormous leverage. Like you have small teams that are running exchanges, and exchanges can be a cash fucking cow or a DEX, foundations behind DEXs, and like there's a lot of ways to make a shit ton of money in crypto, especially if you're in the picks and shovel part of the business, which is always, you get the best leverage with these crazy like meme coins and stuff like that, but the most reliable way to make money in the space is figure out a way to provide a service because so often these companies are essentially treating their operating budget like it's casino chips because they just spun them out of thin air and now they're $100 million market cap company. And so companies tend to be pretty loose with spending. I mean, podcast sponsors, for instance, who do very little like checkup on the podcast actually being created or the ads, like KOL checks that are cut. Like if you can get tax revenue on that, it's a really nice way to, counteract some of the other forces that could be, a drag on growth.
Oh, absolutely. And the podcast and the KOL, I think is a great industry to sort of hone in on and say, look, that space is certainly building. There's a lot of podcasts, a lot of people talking about it. But that's an industry I think that's, and young kids, I have some and they're all like, they all watch YouTube. They all love podcasts. It's like the most sort of exciting way to get news. And it's much better than the mainstream media because you really get if you do it right, get an in-depth conversation with people, and it's fantastic. You get to know who they are, what they think, and how that project is coming out and what their plans are. And I think it's a really great forum, and I think that needs to be fostered. And you're right. I mean, it's going to create a lot of tax revenue when it's done properly and making sure the crypto is taxed in a certain way. I really think that could foster a huge change. And, we've got Tornado Cash ruling that was overturned, which I think is huge, where the sanctions are out. That happened a few months ago. I think that was another big, a big win to say, look, it's software and, the software is similar to a gun. It's like who pulled the trigger, not the person who created the gun or the person who created the software. Sure, there'll be bad actors, but the underlying actual smart contract is not to blame for that. It is useful and it has a lot of merit to it if used properly. Now, certainly it could be used, just like almost anything in a bad way. And if that happens, you punish the people that use it in the bad way, but you don't punish the protocol. And I think that's sort of coming around. And I think a lot of people are going to start realizing that, which I think is going to make a big difference again here. I mean, we're just kind of like pumping it, but I really think it's important to realize how we're at the precipice of a huge change is the way I look at it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, the freeing of or the pardoning of the Silk Road founder,
Yeah.
Ross, is it Albright? Is that how you say it?
Albrecht. Yeah. Same, right.
Albrecht.
Same as Tornado Cash.
That one I was like, I don't know what to think there because I read that book. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to remember the title, but we read it for book club and it went into that story and a couple of other stories all about like sort of like the dark web and that sort of side and law enforcement around it. It was not that story like made it paint that like he was directly involved in like ordering a hit. Which like I always like did not totally grasp. I'm like, okay, is he just getting painted this way because they want to like crush this technology? I'm like, or did like someone who tried to kill someone to protect their company just like get let out? Like I really don't know because I haven't read enough. That's the thing. Like on topics, like you can get up to date on one side of them, but unless you're reading like several books or several podcasts about a subject, like it's really hard to know.
Oh yeah. I mean, like just any topic is, if you read one side or even listen to this podcast, you'd think, oh, it's all great and wonderful. And, there's so many facets and sides to it. And, I don't know the true story. I mean, I'm like you. I kind of thought he was more involved in it rather than, the Tornado Cash was just creating a software. But who knows? I mean, I don't know the true story. Maybe somebody does. I'd be interested to read that book. That would be cool. And then kind of find that out. And then, what's Ross going to do now? I mean, to me, like the world's his oyster in crypto. He's kind of like, yeah, everybody was so pumped to get him out. So, when are we going to see the Silk Road meme coin come out? I'm sure there's 20 of them, but his meme coin, I'm curious if that's going to come out. That'd be interesting.
Dude, I can't wait for his Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman interview. I really hope he does
Yes.
one. Either one would
Oh,
be
that would be
great.
great.
Hopefully he does both because I find like people do like almost like a little circuit where they're hitting like a bunch of like the Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Theo Vaughn. Theo Vaughn's always funny because you get a totally different perspective. Like his Trump interview was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Ross spent a bunch of time in jail. I'm curious as to what he's going to do when he gets out. I mean, that's an interesting sort of turn of events. All of a sudden, you've got 2 life sentences plus more, and then all of a sudden you're out free and clear. That's
Dude, I
wild.
wonder how much like fucking crypto he's got stashed somewhere in like a wallet, like a fucking seed phrase that he muttered to himself as he slept, like each night in prison, knowing like, oh, if I get out of here, I got fucking 10,000 Bitcoin stashed in, these like circled words in a couple books in a public library, John Wick style.
Yeah, I mean, the way if someone's creating Silk Road and all of its intricacies, I don't think even because that was 10 years ago when he gets busted. I mean, how much did the feds know about investigating crypto wallets back then? I would say not that much. Probably wouldn't be that hard to just store a little away and then when you get out. Or I mean, if you get 2 life sentences, maybe you just had somebody visit you and you're like, look, here it is. Just go take it and do what you want with it. I'm stuck here forever. I
Dude,
don't
it's a
know.
fucking hard position to put yourself in someone's shoes, like staring down a life fucking sentence and then getting pardoned out of like kind of nowhere. Like he was not in like really the public zeitgeist going into that.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was like an enemy. Everyone forgot about him. Unless you were in crypto, you wouldn't even think about him again. I mean, to me, I thought Silk Road was always like sort of a really interesting progression in how Bitcoin became more legitimate. I mean, the first step is, the fact that, hey, look, the feds can track all this. It's like, well, look, here's the money where they paid the hitman, and it's a lot easier to track than, sequential dollar bills or whatever they're doing before. To me, it's much easier as long as you know the wallet address. It's pretty easy. I mean, we get calls for scams here all the time, and I'm always like, send me your wallet where you sent it to. We'll find out what's there. And if it's in a US centralized exchange, we have a chance. Otherwise, it's probably hard to catch these people because they're who knows where they are. But we see your money, we know where it went, we know everything it happened to from the time you sent it all the way to the end. It's really an interesting scenario to be able to do that just by you giving us a wallet address. 2 minutes later, we have a full list of everywhere where the money went.
Yeah, it's a whole different game. One last topic I wanted to cover, or one of the ones I had top of mind, was just reflecting after the wedding. Big shout out to the Gothard clan for having a hell of a wedding and all of Bridget's family. Big shout out to the Gothards. Congratulations. But it was just so great getting to hang with, we won't dox anybody, but a good core group of like 8 or 10 people in the space. And you can really develop like these thick friendships online, but there is something special about all getting to hang out together in person.
Oh yeah, like traveling to like some random grocery store to buy food at midnight. Like you get bonding quick when you're doing that, or going to like bars in the quarter. That's all fun. I mean, it's awesome. I had a blast. I haven't stayed out
The
that late in so
dungeon,
long. Yeah,
dude, that place was a fucking trip. I was like, where am I? Like this demonic demon
I haven't
bar.
I haven't been to that place in a really long time. And then I thought it was like there's another place that we called the dungeon, and I was like, wait, no, they're actually talking about the actual dungeon, like on Bourbon Street. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be fun. It's just like loud music and just skulls everywhere. It's an interesting bar. If you're in New Orleans, check out the dungeon. It's fun.
Yeah, I literally made me feel like I was in like a Doom video game.
Yeah, but it was an amazing weekend. Congrats to the Gothards. What a fantastic time for sure.
Yeah, it was great. Well, Jared, I say we wrap it up here if you don't have any other topics.
No, man, we covered everything. I think, I'm just excited to be in crypto today. That's for sure.
Yeah, we gave them the squirrel-based alpha to get things started. If you need a buffalo squirrel recipe, speculation on the market, a little bit of personal plans, we covered it all.
Awesome.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, always a pleasure to be co-hosting with you. Thank you, ladies
Same.
and gentlemen, for tuning in. This has been another episode of Neo Tokyo's official podcast, Interlinked, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Take care, everyone.